The right-wing court was sympathetic to his argument and had no interest in making a martyr out of Hitler.
He received the minimum sentence. It was 5 years. He was not going to spend that long in prison. He would be out in less than a year. He might have been executed for this crime of high treason. Instead, Hitler was put into a minimum security facility. In the photographs, he's sitting wearing lederhosen, a nice ruffly white shirt. Geraniums are in the windows. The room was so filled with his sycophants who had come to listen to his words of wisdom that Hitler finally had to tell his jailers to please restrict admission to his cell because he couldn't get any work done. He had no privacy.
The time in Landsberg prison was a turning point for Hitler. Here he would work to shed his identity as a rabble-rouser and recast himself as a visionary politician. It was in Landsberg that he wrote the first volume of Mein Kampf, My Struggle, part Nazi manifesto, part boastful biography. It was also a record of what he had learned from his failed coup.
From this failure, Hitler draws an important lesson, that he's going to have to use democratic politics to become a mass political movement. Basically, he's going to have to learn the lessons of democracy in order to take revolutionary power.
He never did anything like this again. He never marched on Berlin, say, in 1933. He understood that in a democracy with fully developed mass media, you can't have a revolution like Lenin did by overthrowing the institutions. No, he said, you have to use the institutions of democracy to defeat democracy. First, you get legally established in power, and then you erode the democracy. You destroy the democracy after you seize power.
On December the 20th, 1924, Hitler was released from Landsberg prison.
The Century.
See the USA in your Chevrolet.
Liberty, freedom, opportunity, westward, upward.
The Century. Ultimate power continues.
In 1929, with the onset of the Great Depression, Hitler moved from the margins to the mainstream of German politics. In keeping with his democratic strategy, a remarkably modern political operation had been established. The Nazi Party's nationwide network of offices would be familiar to any precinct captain in American politics. Its mission was to put out the Nazi message.
Hitler was interested in propaganda, pure and simple. That was their job. The grassroots organizations were to gather information. What did people like? What didn't they like? What played well? What didn't play well? And then to send that information back up the chain of command. What they had in mind was a very crude form of political survey research.
And you even have the stormtroopers rebuilt to carry out propaganda. Not to be playing soldier or carrying out a military putsch, but to work as a propaganda troop. And what this means in Hitler's view is passing out pamphlets, marching demonstrations, flags, the use of political violence against one's opponents, the disruption of opponents' meetings and all this sort of thing. That's still legal as long as it's directed against your opponents and not the government.
The Nazis' main opponents were the communists who were preaching revolution. When Hitler called for their destruction, many middle-class Germans approved.
If you saw a group of stormtroopers coming down the street, marching with a military band, with flags waving, maybe chanting, maybe singing, this was looked upon with great favor. And if it then became involved in fights with those on the left, that was good propaganda as well, because it showed the Nazis meant when they said they were going to get rid of the Marxists.
Hitler was a relentless campaigner. He went to as many as 20 cities in 7 days. One of his most effective themes was that democracy doesn't work.
Hitler ridiculed the system, and it was so easy to ridicule.
Ich habe mir ein Ziel gesteckt, nämlich die 30 Parteien aus Deutschland hinauszufegen.
In one of the most effective speeches, he says, people in Germany say I'm un-German because I want to end this miserable system, a system dominated by 37 political parties. I was just recently looking, he says, at the electoral list from the state of Lippe. That's the sort of Rhode Island of Germany, the smallest German state. What do I find? 37 different political parties.
Die Arbeiterschaft, ihre eigenen Parteien, und zwar nicht eine, das wäre zu wenig, es müssen gleich 3, 4 sein. Das Bürgertum, das noch intelligenter ist, braucht daher noch mehr Parteien. Der Landmann auch die eigene Partei, und zwar auch gleich 3, 4. Und die Herren Hausbesitzer müssen ihre besonderen Interessen politischer Art, weltanschaulicher Art auch durch eine Partei vertreten lassen.
It is an absolutely wicked speech. And a great many Germans who were not drawn by the ideology, the expansionist, racist ideology of the party, saw this as a vision of a Germany united.
At that time, this was a very powerful message, this idea of national unity. The greater the disintegration, the greater seemed to be the attraction of one movement claiming that it could transcend all the divisions of Germany, and out of the ashes would rise a new phoenix, and Germany would be great again.
They were young, they were dynamic, and people could feel that they were contributing to an effort that was greater than any one of them individually. And particularly the women said, we belong to our movement, not a party, a movement, a subculture, a community. And anyone who comes in can have access to our soup kitchens. We have a sewing co-op. We have child care for the children. We have a singing society. And in fact, demographically, the largest block of Hitler voters were women. He spoke about the masses as feminine, as susceptible to a kind of ecstatic experience. And if you watch his speeches, was of course a fiery speaker, and he would thunder and he would pound on the podium and he would march around and he would strut. And then he would also step back during the applause and push his hair out of his eyes and almost have a soft image. And when you read the accounts by men as well as by women about how they found Hitler, there's almost no difference in the language of conversion experience between men and women.
But behind the pageantry and the propaganda was another Hitler.
A number of studies of Hitler's rise place emphasis on the sophistication of his propaganda, on the deep sociological forces and the economic traumas. All of these things are important, but it's important to remember Hitler's party murdered the best and brightest of his political opponents for years on end, and that by crippling and terrorizing his opponents, that was at least, if not more important, than abstract economic and sociological forces in allowing Hitler to come to power.
Germans could read the truth about Hitler. A group of reporters risked their lives to tell the world about the Nazi Party. The most determined were the journalists of the Munich Post.
Hitler gave lip service to the idea that he would only be pursuing power through methods of legality. What's so important about the Munich Post coverage is they reveal how much of a lie this was. To these reporters, this was a homicide story. Hitler was more a gangster than a serious politician.
Year after year, for everyone to see, there were front-page stories about stabbings and drownings, and how members of the opposition parties simply disappeared.
Hitler often dispatched Nazi Party stormtroopers to the offices of the Munich Post, where they would sack and pillage the offices and terrorize the people who were there. They risked their lives to set the record straight. They had a slogan, Hitler has no secrets from us. And in fact, they were able to produce one after another secret Nazi Party documents, the most important of which being, I believe, the Nazi Party plan for the Jews.
The Munich Post reported in December 1931 that the Nazi Party had a written plan for the fate of the Jews.
This secret plan used the phrase final solution, the key euphemism for the extermination, mass murder, genocide that Hitler would later carry out. It's a sensationally important story because It reveals that Hitler was contemplating the final solution as far back as 1931.